Hello. There we go. All right. I'm not sure if the audio worked, but let me start this over again. My name is Frank Lavinia. You can catch me at the following URLs. I actually have a new domain name that I bought, and I'm going to use primarily, well, not as the blog. So the Frank's World's a blog. It's been a blog now for over 20 years. I'm going to keep it in place. But I have a new domain or two. I have a lot of domain names, but that's not what I was talking about. Recently, I had the chance to think about something about large language models, right? Obviously, if you're in the AI space, large language models have taken up all the oxygen in the room. Certainly in AI, certainly AI conferences, news, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I have a new podcast that is um, based on AI, actually. Um, and if I could play, let's see, local video, a little bit of a commercial. There we go. I'm going to open that and play this real quick. All right, I'm back. So this got me thinking about a couple things. Not sure if that actually worked, but there's a new podcast I have that I actually script a lot of it through GPT and do some modifications because I've defined the characters I wanted. And I'm just experimenting with it because I think that's a unique concept. But back to LLMs. So this is an interesting video. And now, at the risk of repeating myself, this is Three Blue, One Brown, Grant Sanderson, one of the best scientific math data science YouTubers out there. Now, he has a number of things here that are not related to AI, but when he does do a talk about AI, it is very intriguing. And one of these is a talk on GPTs, particularly the T. And he does a really good job about how GPTs work. And that got me thinking. That really got me thinking about one of a couple of the things that he talks about, right? And I think this short here, come on, that he has explains kind of vector embeddings. Is it? So basically, what he's talking about, and I'll draw it out, and I have actual work I got to get to. I'll make this quick. Um, the idea is, oops. The idea is that you have these spaces, right? So this would be X, Y, and well, that would actually be Z, X. Anyway, you have a 3D space. Um, Clearly, I need to have more Monster Energy drink. But it's the idea that when you embed you vectorize certain words and certain meanings, relationships start to emerge. In his example, and an example that doesn't use any controversial names of history, would be if you had king, right? You would have queen, would be roughly the same distance as emperor to empress. All of which to say is that, and he does it far more eloquently than I do. And certainly, um, the idea that distance, I'll put that in quote because it's not real physical distance. Distance in and of itself inside a model has the ability to convey a certain amount of information. So let's just say we had Prince, right? Prince would be, we know the relation of prince and a princess, right? That would all roughly be the same distance in one of the dimensions. And large language models have thousands of dimensions, which would fry our puny little brains. Um, but it's an interesting idea. And because you are dealing with, spaces here. So let's just say this would be king and that would be queen. If prince was here, princess would be roughly the same distance away. And one of the dimensions could be the gender of the title, right? So there would probably be actor, actress, right? That sort of thing, right? So if actor was here, and I know the term actress has fallen out of favor, but bear with me here, and there would be roughly the same distance, right? And I think he uses the example of historical figures, which I know you two, certain historical figures whose names would not be very happy. But it's the idea that there's a certain amount of, there's a spatial component to knowledge, which is very fascinating to me. And what other things can we infer, right? So if king and queen are that far apart and that dimension, I swear I'm not sponsored by Monster, but it certainly helps. What other sorts of dimensions and whatnot? And then that gets you in the idea of, what sorts of mistakes might be in here or unintended consequences that are in these systems. And that gets you into the idea of latent spaces, right? These are complex spaces that my humble, terrible hand drawing of them on a Friday morning, minus one cup of coffee shy of normal, may not do it justice. And I think this is worth more experimentation, definitely more training. I wanted to take a deeper dive into this. And this kind of came up with the idea that what other sorts of things are here that are unintended consequences? And there's a notion of they call her a cryptid, but there's this person image that comes up quite a bit in image generation software. Now, I haven't heard a lot about her lately. It's a person called Loeb, right? And it's basically a woman, and the words Loeb tend to appear in the background, right? So she's called I've heard her called a latent space cryptid. It's hard to separate the truth from this, from a lot of the creepy pastas and the conspiracy theories and where's entertainment and where's pseudoscience and all that, right? But I find the idea of a cryptid existing in these latent spaces, and cryptid is not really the right word, but artifact might be a better word, right? We're building out complicated spaces. And this came up on an internal company thread at Red Hat where I would show you the email, but that would probably upset a lot of people. But basically, it was like, we're building out these systems. Oh, I remember. It's a controversy around these idea of open weight models, right? And I've talked about these before, but open weight models are the idea that for intents and purposes, they are open source, usually LLMs, right? Now, the argument for them are you have a lot more transparency. You have a lot more insight into what's going on, and that's important, and that's a topic for another stream. However, some people say by exposing the weights, and when I say the weights, these are the weights and the biases, basically the vector encodings, right? And if you don't know what I'm saying, that's okay. But it's an interesting concept because you can open source these, right? These open weight models, because when you're dealing with AI, right, you have a number of options here, right? You can have open data, and I'm not sharing the full screen. There we go. When you're dealing with AI, you can have the open data, right? The data that you sourced it from is open and available and freely available, right? So if you go to data.gov, Baltimore, the city where I live near, they have an open data thing like parking tickets. New York has this. One of my jobs at Microsoft was working with city chief data officers and such, right? So you have the data could be open, right? Then you have the idea of the open research, right? Right? The papers, the research papers that go along with this, right? So for LLMs, the magic paper was about 2019. Attention is all you need. Something like that. But you can also have the open weights where all of the vectors and weights to the neural network you expose. You're basically exposing the model, right? The pros are it's open, right? You have a lot more transparency. Not V, that's supposed to be check mark, transparent. Which should lead to increased trust. That's plus plus, not multiple T's. Trust plus plus. The counter argument is you get bad actors have the ability to sniff around and look for guardrails to make the model do something bad. Now, the argument here is this sounds familiar. That's security through obscurity. And security through obscurity doesn't exactly have an excellent track record. And there was kind of a debate about that. And then my kind of take was trust the trend line, right? We don't know. We haven't fully explored the unintended consequences and all the stuff that exists in these latent spaces of models that we're building. And you could make the argument that exposing the open weights are risks, right? And then it was there's also an ethical component of trust us, we can't trust you to do it on your own. That's a fascinating thought. So my take is we don't know what we don't know. And I think when it comes to the complexity of these systems, that we just keep building them bigger and bigger and bigger, I think there's an exponential component in terms of their complexity and relationships that get built. I also think that we should just rely on kind of historically security through obscurity doesn't work, right? People have found Loeb, assuming that all the stories are true, kind of randomly. And you can look at it, but basically there's a lot of conspiracy theories about this Loeb artifact, cryptid, entity, whatever. Whether or not it's true, it's certainly plausible. And that's what I find fascinating. So I think in Star Trek, they said space was the final frontier. I would say no. I would say latent space is the final frontier. And with that little soundbite right there, I'm going to end the stream, finish my coffee, and get ready for my next meeting. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this content, be sure to like, share, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, hit me up, put a comment down. And you've not connected with me, I'd be happy to connect with you. So with that in mind, I'm going to sign off, play the outro graphics, and you have a great day and have a great weekend.